At last the eventful moment came. The lens was completed. I stood trembling on the threshold of new worlds. I had the realization of Alexander's famous wish before me. The lens lay on the table, ready to be placed upon its platform. My hand fairly shook as I enveloped a drop of water with a thin coating of oil, of turpentine, preparatory to its examination, a process necessary in order to prevent the rapid evaporation of the water. I now placed by the combined aid of the prism and a mirror a powerful stream of light. I approached my eye to the minute hole drilled through the axis of the lens. For an instant I saw nothing save what seemed to be an illuminated chaos, a vast luminous abyss. A pure white light, cloudless and serene and seemingly limitless as space itself, was my first impression. Gently and with the greatest care I depressed the lens a few hair breadths. The wondrous illumination still continued, but as the lens approached the object, a scene of indescribable beauty was unfolded to my view. I seemed to gaze upon a vast space, the limits of which extended far beyond my vision. An atmosphere of magical luminescence permeated the entire field of view. I was amazed to see no trace of animalculous life, not a living thing. Apparently inhabited the dazzling expanse, I comprehended instantly that by the wondrous power of my lens I had penetrated beyond the grosser particles of the aqueous matter, beyond the realms of infusoria and protozoa, down to the original gaseous globule into whose luminous interior I was gazing as into an almost boundless dome filled with a supernatural radiance. It was, however, no brilliant void into which I looked on. Every side I beheld beautiful ignorant forms of unknown texture, colored with the most enchanting hues. These forms presented the appearance of what might be called, for want of more specific definition, foliated clouds of the highest rarity, that is, they undulated and broken into vegetable formations, and were tinged with splendors compared with the gliding of our autumn woodlands, is a dross compared with gold. Far away into the illimitable distance stretched the long avenues of these gaseous forests, dimly transparent and painted with prismatic hues of unimaginable brilliancy. The pendant branches waved along with fluid glades until every vista seemed to break through half-loosened ranks of many-colored drooping silken pennons. What seemed to be either fruits or flowers, pied with thousand hues, lustrous and ever-varying, bubbled from the crowns of this fairy foliage. No hills, no lakes, no rivers, no forms, animate or inanimate, were to be seen, save those vast aureole corpses that floated serenely in the luminous stillness, with leaves and fruits and flowers gleaming with unknown fires, unrealizable by mere imagination. How strange, I thought, that this sphere should be thus condemned to solitude. I had hoped at least to discover some new form of animal life, perhaps of a lower class than with any which we are present acquainted, but still some living organism. I found my newly discovered world, if I may so speak, a beautiful chromatic desert. While I was speculating on the singular arrangements of the international economy of nature, with which she so frequently splinters into atoms our most compact theories, I thought I beheld a form moving slowly through the glades of one of the prismatic forests. I looked more attentively, and found what I was not mistaken. Words cannot depict the anxiety with which I awaited the nearer approach of this mysterious object. Was it merely some inanimate substance held in a suspense in an attenuated atmosphere of the globule, or was it an animal endowed with vitality and emotion? It approached, flitting behind the gauzy-colored veils of cloud foliage, for seconds dimly revealed, then vanishing. At last the violet pennons that trailed nearest to me vibrated. They were gently pushed aside, and the form floated out into the broad light. It was female human shape. When I say human, I mean it possessed the outlines of humanity, but there were analogy ends. Its adorable beauty lifted it illimitable heights beyond the loveliest daughter of Adam. I dare not attempt to inventory the charms of this divine revelation of perfect beauty. Those eyes of mystic violet, dewy and serene, evade my words. Her long, lustrous hair following her glorious head in a golden wake, like the tracks sown in heaven by a falling star, seems to quench by most burning phrases with its splendors. If all the bees of Hybla nested upon my lips, they would still sting but hoarsely the wondrous harmonies of the outline there enclosed her form. She swept from out between the rainbow's curtains of the cloud trees into the broad sea of light that lay beyond. Her emotions were those of some grace naiad cleaving by mere effort of her will, the clear unruffled waters that filled the chambers of the sea. She floated forth with the serene grace of a frail bubble ascending through the still atmosphere of a June day. The perfect roundness of her limbs formed suave and enchanting curves. It was like listening to the most spiritual sympathy of Beethoven the divine, to watch the harmonious flow of lines. This indeed was a pleasure cheaply purchased at any price. What cared if I had waded to the portal of this wonder through another's blood? I would have given it my own to enjoy one such moment of intoxication and delight. Breathless with gazing on this lovely wonder, and forgetful for an instant of everything save her presence, I withdrew my eye from the microscope eagerly. Alas! As my gaze fell upon the thin slide that lay beneath my instrument, the brighter light from the mirror and from prism sparkled on a colorless drop of water. There in that tiny bead of dew, this beautiful being was forever imprisoned. The planet Neptune was not more distant from me than she. I hastened once more to apply my eye to the microscope. Animalia, let me now call her that by the dear name which I subsequently bestowed upon her, had changed her position. She had again approached the wondrous forest and was gazing earnestly upward. Presently, one of the trees, as I must call them, unfolded a long ciliary process, which it would seized on the gleaming fruits that glittered on its summit, and sweeping slowly down, held within its reach of Animalia, the sylphs took in her delicate hand and began to eat. My attention was so entirely absorbed by her that I could not apply myself to the task of determining whether this singular plant was or was not instinct with volition. I watched her as she made her repast with the most profound attention. The suppleness of her emotions set a thrill of delight through my frame. My heart beat madly as she turned her beautiful eyes in the direction of the spot in which I stood. What would I not have given to have had the power to precipitate myself into that luminous ocean and float with her through those grooves of purple and gold? While I was thus breathlessly following her every movement, she suddenly started to seem to listen for a moment, and then cleaving the brilliant ether in which she was floating, like a flash of light, pierced through the opaline forest and disappeared. Instantly a series of the most singular sensations attacked me. It seemed as if I had suddenly gone blind. The luminous sphere was still before me, but my daylight had vanished. What caused this sudden disappearance? Had she a lover or a husband? Yes, that was the solution. Some signal from a happy fellow being had vibrated through the avenues of the forest, and she had obeyed the summons. The agony of my sensations as I arrived at this conclusion startled me. I tried to reject the conviction that my reason forced upon me. I battled against the fatal conclusion, but in vain. It was so, I had no escape from it. I loved an animalcule. It is true that thanks to the marvelous power of my microscope that she appeared of human proportions, instead of presenting the revolting aspect of coarser creatures that lived and struggle and die in the more easily resolvable portions of a water drop. She was fair and delicate and of surpassing beauty. But of what account was all that? Every time that my eye was withdrawn from the instrument it fell on the miserable drop of water, within which I must be content to know dwelt all that could make my life lovely. Could but she see me once, could I for one moment pierce the mystical wall so that she inexorably rose to separate us and whisper all that filled my soul, I might consent to be satisfied for the rest of my life with the knowledge of her remote sympathy. It would be something to have established even the faintest personal link to bind us together, to know at times when roaming through those enchanted glades that she might think of the wonderful stranger who had broken the monotony of her life with his presence, and left a gentle memory in her heart. But it could not be. No invention of which human intellect was capable could break down the barriers that nature had erected. I might feast my soul upon her wondrous beauty, yet she must always remain ignorant of the adoring eyes that day and night gazed upon her, and even when closed beheld her in the dreams. With a bitter cry of anguish I fled from the room, and flinging myself on my bed, sobbed myself to sleep like a child. I arose the next morning, almost at daybreak, and rushed to my microscope. I trembled as I sought the luminous world in the miniature that contained my all. Animalia was there. I had left the gas lamp, surrounded by its moderators, burning when I went to bed the night before. I found the sylph bathing, as it were, with an expression of pleasure animating her features in the brilliant light which surrounded her. She tossed her lustrous golden hair over her shoulders with innocent coquetry. She lay at full length in the transparent medium in which she supported herself with ease, and gamboled with the enchanting grace that the nymph Samidas might have exhibited when she sought to conquer the modest Hermaphroditus. I tried an experiment to satisfy myself if her powers of reflection were developed. I lessened the lamplight considerably. By the dim light that remained, I could see an expression of pain flit across her face. She looked up suddenly, and her brows contracted. I flooded the stage of the microscope again with full stream of light, and her whole expression changed. She sprang forward like some substance deprived of all weight. Her eyes sparkled and her lips moved, as if some by science, only the means of conducting and duplicating sounds as it does rays of light. What carols of happiness would then have entranced my ears? What jubilant hymns to Adonis would have thrilled the illuminated air? I now comprehended how it had then Count de Gabalus peopled his mystic world with sylphs, beautiful beings whose breath of life was lambent fire, and who sported forever in regions of purest ether and purest light. The resurrection and had anticipated the wonder that I had practically realized. How long this worship of strange divinity went on thus I scarcely know. I lost all note of time. All day from early dawn and far into the night I was to be found peering through that wonderful lens. I saw no one, went nowhere, and scarce allowed myself sufficient time for my meals. My whole life was absorbed in contemplation as rapt as any of those of the Romish saints. Every hour that I gazed upon the divine form strengthened my passion, a passion that was always overshadowed by the maddening conviction that although I could gaze on her at will, she never could behold me. At length I grew so pale and emaciated from what I want of rest and continual brooding over my insane love and its cruel conditions that I determined to make some effort to wean myself from it. "Come," I said, "this is at best but a fantasy. Your imagination had bestowed on Anumilla charms which in reality she does not possess. Seclusion from female society has produced this morbid conviction of mine. Compare her with the beautiful women of your own world, and this false enchantment will vanish." I looked over the newspapers by chance. There I beheld the advertisement of a celebrated Danus who appeared nightly at Niblo's. The Signorian Candalus had the reputation of being the most beautiful as well as the most graceful woman in the world. I instantly dressed and went to the theater. The curtain drew up. The usual semicircle of fairies in white muslin were standing on the right toe around the enameled flower bank of green canvas on which the belated prince was sleeping. Suddenly a flute is heard. The fairies start, the trees open, the fairies all stand on the left toe, and the queen enters. It was the Signoria. She bounded forward, and the thunders of applause and lightning on one foot remained poised in the air. Heavens! Was this the great enchantress that had drawn monarchs at her chariot's wheels? Those heavy muscular limbs, those thick ankles, those cavernous eyes, that stereotyped smile, those crudely painted cheeks? Were there the vamuel blooms, the liquid expressive eyes, the harmonious limbs of Anumilla? Signorina danced. What gross discordant movements! The play of her limbs was all false and artificial. Her bounds were painful athletic efforts. Her poses were angular and distressed the eye. I could bear it no longer. With an exclamation of disgust that drew every eye upon me, I rose from my seat in the very middle of Signorina's pas de fascination, and abruptly quitted the house. I hastened home to feast my eyes once more upon the lovely form of my sylph. I felt that henceforth to combat this passion would be impossible. I applied my eyes to the lens. Anumilla was there, but what could have happened? Some terrible change seemed to have taken place during my absence. Some secret grief seemed to cloud the lovely features of her I gazed upon. Her face had grown thin and haggard. Her limbs trailed heavily. The wondrous luster of her golden hair had faded. She was ill, and I could not assist her. I believe at that moment I would have forfeited all claims to my human birthright if I could only have been dwarfed to the size of an animalcule and permitted to console her from whom fate had forever divided me. I racked my brain for the solution of this mystery. What was it that afflicted the sylph? She seemed to suffer intense pain. Her features contracted, and she even writhed, as if some internal agony. The wondrous forests appeared also to have lost their beauty. Their hues were dim, and in some places faded away altogether. I watched Anumilla for hours with a breaking heart, and she seemed absolutely to wither away under my very eye. Suddenly I remembered that I had not looked at the water drop for several days. In fact, I hated to see it, for it reminded me of the natural barrier between Animilla and myself. I hurriedly looked down on the stage of the microscope. The slide was still there, but great heavens, the water drop had vanished. The awful truth burst upon me. It had evaporated until it had become so minute that it had to be invisible to the naked eye. I had been gazing on its last atom, the one that contained Animilla, and she was dying. I rushed again to the front of the lens and looked through. Alas, the last agony had seized her. The rainbow hues forest had all melted away, and Animilla lay struggling feebly in what seemed to be a spot of dim light. Ah, the sight was horrible. The limbs once so round and lovely shriveling up into nothing. The eyes, those eyes that shone like heaven, being quenched into black dust. The lustrous golden hair now lank and discolored. The last throe came. I beheld the final struggle of the blackening form, and I fainted. When I awoke out of a trance of many hours, I found myself laying amid in the wreck of instruments, myself as shattered in mind as body as it is. I crawled feebly to bed, from which I did not arise for many months. They say now that I am mad, but they are mistaken. I am poor, for I have neither the heart nor the will to work. All my money is spent, and I live on charity. Young men's associations that love a joke invite me to lecture on optics before them, for which they pay me, and laugh at me while I lecture. Linley the mad microscopist is the name I go by. I suppose that I talk incoherently while I lecture. Who could talk sense with his brain is haunted by such ghastly memories, while ever and anon among the shapes of death I behold the radiant form of my lost Animilla?